resilience is for me last year when I got accepted onto the, specialty of my dreams, because, 10 years is not a long time. And a lot of people asked me, because I forgot to mention. So in the same year that I was studying, for both of my exams and learning how to be a first year registrar, I was also the chief resident at our district health board. And this was around, I think resilience for me is, it's really hard, but I think last year, like post-COVID, Dr. Ashley Bloomfield actually came to talk to us about resilience. And I just remember one of the things he said was around resilience was resilience is actually not just always being zealous all the time and always not knowing when to stop. It's not like you going in full accelerator mode and just going for the prize, but actually resilience requires, as he said, it requires a lot of time where you actually just pause and reflect and take the rest that you need. And I think what he was trying to get at was resilience is actually knowing when to, ask for help and when to, when to ask for help and when to lay things down. And it's really coming to understand your own limits and how much you can take on. And I think I really related to that because I'm a person who, so just around my other personal background, I have a little sister who who lives in Sydney now, but I am the oldest in the family, but also my mum raised us solely on her own. So I've always been someone who has been pretty stoic about a lot of things. And from a very young age, I just felt like there was a lot that I just had to, although no one's pressured me, I just felt based on this unconditional love that my mom raised us with, that I always have to try and give back to her and the community that always supported us through, our childhood years as well. So there was always this mentality of, and I'm sure lots of immigrant kids can relate to this, especially if you've had a tough upbringing, that you just grow up with this unspoken pressure of of having to do well in life. I think for the longest time, that's how I felt. And my mom actually, my mom's one of those rare moms who, she didn't want me to become a doctor. And she said, are you sure? Because my dad is a doctor, so she knew what was at stake and what my life would turn out like. So she wanted me to pursue the life, not saying architecture is easier, but she just wanted me to do what I wanted to do in life. And, so I think throughout the many years, there were times where I tried to do it all alone, because I'm just because I was so used to doing everything all alone growing up. There were times where I didn't ask for help, and there were times where I thought my ways were the best and would be better without having to ask for someone's opinion. But actually, last year, once I came to serve as the chief resident and came to work alongside some of the other executive members and my co-chief and everyone else, that's when I realized, you really can't do it alone. And you can only be resilient as much as the help that you ask for. So I really agree with the sentiments that Dr. Bloomfield, and he's one of the key icons of resilience as well, because he did pull through a team of 5 million through the COVID crisis. And there would have been times where he would have had immense amount of pressure, the whole of New Zealand, just pressure on his shoulders as he had to deliver those 3 p.m. updates and stuff. But I think the way that he spoke about resilience was really humble. And resilience shouldn't be looked upon as something that gives you power by any means, but actually I think the more you become resilient, if it's truly knowing what your limits are, and taking breaks and asking for help, then it can only make you more humble. That's what I thought. So
Okay.
yeah.
So let's say someone in the early 20s came to you, a friend of you, and said, Dr. Roh or Juhee, I want to build resilience. I think I want to grow my resilience. You did talk about some of the things that worked for you and some of the tips that you got. What are your top 3 tips for me to learn how to become more resilient?
Yeah. So I think that could be summarized by what I just said, which would be number 1 would be know what your limits are, understanding your own personal limits. That's how you can start off, because at some point, if you don't know what your personal limits are, you are going to burn out, and that's going to be a huge barrier to you kind of running this long haul race, and it's not going to help with your resilience at all. And I say that it's important knowing your personal limits, and there's a reason why I don't say, like, challenge your personal limits and try and overcome them, because some people would say that is resilience, but personally for me, by like a lot of trial and error in my 20s and having like done so many various roles, I think, because this is like my advice and my personal story, I would say that, yeah, knowing your personal limits would make you more resilient long term. Secondly, I think yeah, it's know when to also, it's kind of on a similar tangent to like knowing your personal limits, but know when it's time to just take a break and rest. Because, and I know how daunting that can be in your early 20s when everyone seems to be like, doing the grind and are busy doing the hustle and the bustle. And sometimes I think living in New Zealand, like, people might feel it less, but I think a lot of people from very busier cities, like, I'm South Korean, and I recently was in Korea back in May, and even just being like in a subway station sometimes makes me feel anxious because everyone's like has an agenda. They're always on the move, and if you're not doing anything, you feel like you're just lagging behind. But there's so many juniors that have come and asked me, actually, whether it's all right to take a break at this point in the career, because though I am a doctor, I'm currently, my job status is Peksu, which in in English that means you're unemployed. And no, it's not because I've been fired. In fact, Whatu messages me on a daily basis asking if I want to pick up more shifts, but I say no. And that's because I decided consciously that, I've done my 10-year race, and before I start my 4-year race that's to come in dermatology, I really need, this is like a really good time for me to just recoup, and as we mentioned at the very start, just reevaluate and understand and process and revisit what my purpose of starting this whole journey was. So yeah, my advice to anyone, and I literally had someone ask me this the other day, whether it's okay to take a gap year, whether there would be any like disadvantages like in the long run. And my answer is always like, no, like, just remember, don't lose, one of my favorite quotes is like, I think it's like, don't lose sight of the forest because you're too focused on the trees. And essentially that's just saying like, you always got to look at the bigger picture, and you always feel like, because we're confined to time, we're always, that 1 month or like that 6 month or even like up to a year break that we take could have huge consequences later on in life, but it really doesn't. And yeah, so if you've understood your personal limits and you really think that now is time to take a break, then I would say by all means take that break. And yeah, one of my other favorite like things, I have lots of favorite quotes that I live by in my
how
head.
are they all your favorite if you have so many favorites, Juhee?
But I really truly believe, yeah, like, so one of my favorites is like, direction is more important than speed, and you're only going to know, like, which direction to go to if you take that break. Otherwise, you'll just keep going. And trust me, you will. Like, you're not going to find out, as you're going, when you're on the motorway, you don't suddenly realize like, oh, like I've gone off route. Like, you're just going to keep going by the same route. So yeah. And then my third point on how to build resilience would be asking for help. Yeah. So we're two.
How would you ask? Like, if someone has never asked help, like, what's your first step?
That's a good question.
Because that's daunting for a lot of people. Maybe it's too vulnerable. I don't even know how to start. People think I'm weak. People think I'm a failure, not performing. People might be disappointed. I might be embarrassing. Yeah, or they just don't know where to go, how to start.
I'm usually a person who also doesn't ask for help, as I said earlier. I just prefer to do things on my own terms. And sometimes I do think things are going to be better solved if I just end up like, resolving it rather than asking for help. But it's also like, I think just knowing that, so as someone like who doesn't really ask for help and gives help to other people, I think it's also good to understand that people do actually want to help you. And I can say this from, a perspective of people who always helps other people. And, all these thoughts that you're engrossed with, like, what if I'm, as you said, like it's all this imposter syndrome stuff coming up, right? So like things like, well, what if they think I'm dumb, or like, are they going to think any less of me because I've asked for help? And I always say this to my intern house officers or like my other colleagues, the medical students that I tend to remember the most, because like medical students also come to the hospital for like rotations and placements and things. The ones that I tend to remember the most, because in a good way, are not the ones who come and just flaunt their knowledge and to kind of up themselves, and like those who boast of their knowledge and who never ask for help. It's the ones who really come to me and ask whether they can like ask more about this condition or try and understand this case better, or because to me that shows you like, first of all, it shows me that they're genuinely interested and wanting to like be involved as part of the team. But as someone who's asked for a lot of help, and most people would try and think along this tendency as well, we all know what that feels like. We all know how much courage it takes to ask someone those questions, because I've been a medical student where I've asked those questions myself as well. So I've come to just, appreciate and remember and genuinely like value those students that have come through those placements.
I think the biggest thing is sometimes people forget that inaction is still an action, it's still a choice. And a lot of people diminish the risk of not taking any action and just get bombarded or like constrain themselves with the fear of taking that new risk. But you're already taking a risk by doing nothing, and it's harming you, obviously. So asking for help it requires courage. At the same time, it still needs a courage to stay in your place in that dark or unhappy place for a longer period of time. So sometimes that change in perspective can be quite helpful.
Colleagues as well, but
and that's quite helpful.
Especially in medicine, because of all the micro traumas you go through. And one of the things we always do is debrief after like a very traumatic incident. If like a lot of people don't think that it really affects them having encountered so many deaths or so many like family conflicts and things, but it really does weigh you down. And you would think that oh, but like you're a doctor, like this is like your job. But not everyone goes to work with the anticipation that you're gonna see a 5-year-old going through chemo, and then that would be the end of their day, and then their families would have to cope with that. So it doesn't get any easier. So something that I've always said to my junior colleagues is make sure that you have your network in place, because there will be a day where you really need them the
100%.
most, and you really need to
Yeah.
fall back on them. So
Mm, mm.
ask for help, start practicing asking for help early, because yes, you will really need them.
Yeah, it's really good because someone might be listening to this and they might think we're repeating ourselves multiple times with different topics. And you can't forget life is a continuum. It's not like resilience, purpose, being a doctor. It's all interconnected. So
Yeah.
what Juhee is really saying to our audience is it's the long haul game. And the long haul game is based not solely on you because we're networks of relationships. And there are times where you're in a really good state, whether your life is going well, your relationship's going well, your studies going well, but there are days it's not for your friend. So if you help, and in the long run, you're more likely to have others that will help you when you're in a time of need. So I think a lot of people get stuck in this transactional relationship as well. People don't offer and only try to receive help, help me, and get to the state. And then there are people who don't know how to receive help, and they're the only ones that are giving out help. So it's a fine balance. And also surround yourself with good people. And good people do come when you're, well, if you try to uphold yourself with good integrity or good intentions. So I think good things are always near us, as you mentioned. Yeah,
I
once
think
we want
so.
to see it.
And yeah, if you really need help and you're too proud to ask for it, or if you're too embarrassed, you can always message me and I'll try and help you. I don't know, like if any of your five subscribers need help, but like I'm I'm always here, so you're not alone.
Okay, maybe at the end it was like I would go like, "This is how you find Juhee," and then I would go,
here,
yeah,
click this link
so
here.
click I kind of like. We want to head towards wrapping up because I think our audience may be losing attention by now. So I think people or the listeners can tell already that we've had vast ranges of experience that required a lot of resilience, a lot of focus, building community. And we wanted to end this conversation on the topic burnout. And that's kind of nicely intertwined with resilience, because sometimes the first time you get to know your limit is when you hit this burnout. So maybe that's a good place to start. Like, what does burnout look like? How do you know when you're in it?
Burnout looks like you just don't. I think the easiest way to know when you're burnt out is when you just don't know why you're doing this anymore. I think that's the biggest red flag. Once you lose your sense of purpose, that's when you know you're burnt out. It's not that your purpose has changed, but like your way to able to cope with that has changed because you're burnt out. So also for me, like I once read this book called Crazy Busy by Kevin DeYoung because I was so burnt out and so crazy busy as well. And there are actually like 10 signs of telling how you're burnt out, like and signs and examples in life. And one of the things that really struck a chord with me was I know I'm stressed and burnt out when I always go a couple of kilometers above the speed limit, and when I become like really, really high strung and pissed off, like when I'm driving. And that's when I know, like for me, that's like a red flag or like my personal alarm for knowing when I'm burnt out. And that's when I like really just have to like, tell myself, okay, Juhee, like what's going on here? Let's just see how many things are on your plate right now and reassess like how many things you can offload. So so that's how you know when you burn
And I
out.
guess,
And
how would you get out once you know that you're in it? So you've mentioned about knowing your cues. That was from your driving for yourself. And then reassessing how much you have on your plate. And what more can someone do when they're in that space?
I think I think it like my answer to the burnout is really like the same answer to how you're going to grow your resilience. Because really the two go hand in hand. And this is going to be the series. it can really go both ways. You can really like down spiral and really end up in a pickle, or you can really grow. This could be like a means to grow more resilience. So it's you could got to pick and choose, right? So I would pick going the resilient way in life. So I think, yeah. So when I was like the most burnt out was 2 years ago when I studied for my Royal College of Physicians exam, and at the same time still learning how to, you know, adapt to this new role of being a registrar. How I coped with it back then was I completely went off social media, because I think looking at other people's highlight reels wasn't making me feel any better. So I went off completely off social media. And I also, this is not by any means, this is not a good thing to do, but I also kind of slowly withdrew from a lot of people, that supportive network of people that I talked about earlier. And then I just, on days where I didn't want to do anything, I didn't force myself to do anything. I just literally didn't do anything. I slept a lot, I ate a lot, and then I decided to go on a holiday. So do I regret having spent my time that way? And how I coped with it then? Yes, because I think so that's an example of a time when help came to me and I didn't ask for help. So a lot of my close supported network of friends noticed like something was off, and that I didn't seem like my usual self. So they, I think, like showed me in different ways and through different love languages that they were still there for me and that they were praying for me. And back then I was too proud to also like be thankful of that. But in retrospect, I think that's one way that I could have like coped better. But I think what helped me the most was, as I said earlier, just going back to the 3 principles of knowing what's on your plate. And what I mean by that is knowing your personal limits. Don't be embarrassed to lay something down if you're already midway through it and you feel like you just can't keep like holding in your plate anymore. Because there were a lot of things that I just had to come, even though it was quite like sour and having to admit this, I did, like there were lots of things that I had to lay down and said, no, I can't keep to this commitment anymore. So knowing your personal limits, knowing what's on your plates, not knowing, knowing that you don't have to juggle all different plates at once is important. And secondly, like I went on a holiday, so I took a break at the time, and that was really helpful. And again, like refinding my purpose. And then thirdly, like I started after I came back from the holiday, I started like reaching out to my closest like supportive network of friends and family, and asked like, can you pray with me at the season of my life when I'm like so stressed and so confused? So that really helped. And yeah, just that's how I coped with it back then. So it's the same path that's going to help you grow resilience.
And I think it's also reassuring knowing that there aren't no multiple answers. There's a one answer, which is complex. It takes time. It is still a long haul game in itself, building those networks of community. But it's not like you go do that, you go do this, and you go do this. Once you have this thing, a healthy relationship, you're more likely to become more resilient. You're more likely to not have to go through burnout. And if you do go hitting your limits, then you're more likely to not get stuck in it for longer than someone who doesn't have a healthy community to pull you out. So I think it's been really great, like talking about your career. I think as much as I would like to think that we now have a lot of different career options, but as immigrants and Asian family, we still highly regard medicine and highly regard doctors. So I think it's really good that we were able to talk about your career and where you were, and also congratulations on getting into that competitive dermatology specialty. Knowing that it was a long-term dream must be a really rewarding place to be. I think it's really good to end our conversation now that we've gone through resilience and burnout. If you were now face to face with your 20-year-old Juhee, What is one thing? Oh, without crying, you can't cry. What is one word of advice that you would give to your 20-year-old Juhee?
I would tell my 20-year-old Juhee that it doesn't get easier, but you will become stronger. That's what I'll probably tell her. And that's what I will probably tell anyone that's about to embark on this journey, that by no means does it get easier. It does, the more you take on, the more responsibilities you're going to bear. And the more, if something goes wrong, that means there are going to be more repercussions. And, the more you have to also lose. So it doesn't get easier. And I don't want to sugarcoat it to anyone and tell them just because I made it on the other side now, that it was all a sweet dream. But you definitely, through the times that you go through those things, you build resilience. Through the many trial and errors of how to manage burnout, you do become stronger. So I think it's also important then to acknowledge the progress that you've made at that point. So I'll probably tell Juhee that, just just look at the bigger picture, because there are greater things that are coming, and sit tight, because we're in it for the long haul.
So if you liked what you heard, like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe.
Yes. And if you, that's us really.
Thank you.